Now, last week we learned and practiced over and over again how to turn fractions into decimals, and we started with the easiest ones, the tenths and the hundredths. So if I had 3/10, I look at my decimal and my tenths place, so that would be 0 in my ones, 0.3, because I have no whole numbers in front of it. Okay, if I had 4/100ths, that would be 0 in my ones, then my decimal. I don't have any tenths, but 4 in my hundredths. See how it ends in my hundredths place? Okay. We know how to do that very, very well. That part's not hard for us anymore. Okay. And what we did this last week too, or even yesterday I should say, not last week, we did this week, is we talked about some of the decimals that we come across a lot. The first one is 1/4. What's 1/4 again? What's the decimal for 1/4? Emma.
0.25.
Yeah, 0.25. It's 25/100ths. What about 1/2 or 2/4? What does 1/2 or 2/4 equal?
0.5.
0.5. Because we're basically doubling it. 25 times 2 is 50. We can put this 0 right here, but we don't need it. Okay, remember all the numbers that come to the right of our numbers and after the decimal, they're just placeholders. They don't mean have any value. And then what about 3/4? What does 3/4 equal?
0.75.
Yes, Justin, 0.75. Okay. All right, so those are the ones that we always know. We have to kind of we use the pictures to figure them out. Easy just to memorize them. I'm putting them here so when you do your homework, they're there. Okay. But what we're going to have today is we're going to have to compare them. Okay, putting them together, fractions and decimals. So how about this first one? 3/36/100ths. 3/4. Okay. What I need to do is step 1. I am going to look at the whole numbers to see if one of them is bigger than the other. Okay. 3 and 3. Is any of them bigger than the other? They're not, are they? So step 2. Who thinks they should know what, or who thinks they know what I should do next?
Look at the tenths.
But do I have, what do I need to do before I can start looking at the tenths and hundreds? What should I
Change
do?
it into a decimal.
Yes, convert the fractions into decimals. Convert fractions into decimals. That's nice. Okay. Now this one, it's what's nice about this one is they already hook it up for us by having a 10 or a 100 in the denominator. So we know that these fractions are tenths and hundreds. I say they were nice. I'm the one who wrote the problem. But, you know, in the book you'll have these too. So how do I turn 3/36/100ths into a decimal?
0.36.
Not quite. We left off our whole number. Donovan. 3.36. Because we have this whole number in the ones place that goes to the left of the decimal. And 36/100ths that ends in my hundredths place, the second place over. Now, how do I turn 3/4 into a decimal? Rachel.
You do 3.4.
Yeah, 3.4, because the 4 is in my tenths place right after the decimal. Now, what do I do now? I've converted them into decimals. What do I do now? And I know my whole numbers are the same. Jacob.
3.6
No, you didn't. What's my next step, though?
You compare the two decimals.
What do I start with, though?
Look at the tens.
Yes, compare the numbers in the tenths. Oops, I should. In the tenths place. I compare the number in the tenths place. 3 and 4. Okay. Are they the same? No. One of them's different. So what is 3 and 36 hundredths greater than or less than 3 and 4 tenths? Sydney.
It's less than.
It's less, yes. Because I look in the tenths place, that one number is greater, isn't it? Now let's say they were the same. I'm going to write these out just for good measure. I'm going to say compare the numbers in the hundredths place, then the thousandths place. We're just going to go on down the road, okay? Now, one thing you're going to need to know how to do is what happens if the fraction isn't one of these, or the denominators don't have a 10 or a 100 in them. So I'm going to give you a couple new ones, okay? One like this you might see on your homework. 4 and 3/5. 5. I don't want to make 5 because I want the whole numbers to be the same. 4 and 1/2. Now, neither of these have a 10 or a 100 in the denominator's place. What can I do to this 3/5 fraction to make it easier to write the decimal? What can I do? Andrew.
Multiply it by 2.
Why am I going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2?
So you can get to 10 because we know.
Yeah, so we can get this, have this of a 10 in the denominator because we have a tenths place. So we're going to multiply both by 2, the numerator and denominator. And that makes our new fraction 4 and 6/10. Can I write a decimal for 4 and 6/10? How do I write my decimal for 4 and 6/10? How do I write 4 and 6/10 as a decimal? Don't I have a tenths place? I do. So how do I write as a decimal? Donovan. 4.6. 4 6/10, so 6 in my tenths place. Now, 1/2, I can look over here and I know that 1/2 is going to be 0.5 all the time. But let's work it out. Let's see, how do we get there? Yesterday we used pictures. Today I want to use equivalent fractions. How can I make this fraction 1/2 into a fraction that I can use to write one of these? Emma,
Multiply 2 times 5.
to get to 10 because I have a tenths place, don't I? So I'm going to multiply the top by 5 and the bottom by 5. 4, so 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Boom! 4 and 5/10. Do I know how to make 4 and 5/10 into a decimal? How do I make 4 and 5/10 into a decimal?
4.5.
Exactly. Good job, Ariza. 4.5, because I have 5/10. 5 in my tenths place. Okay? Now, can I figure out which one's more? I sure can. I could have up here, couldn't I? 4 and 6/10, 4 and 5/10, they're the same denominator. But I want to make it a decimal. It's good practice. Something we're going to have to know how to do. Is 4 and 6/10 or 4 and 3/5 greater or less than 4 and 1/2?
Yeah.
Is it greater or less than?
Great.
Greater, that's right. Greater than. Greater than. Greater than. Okay. Now I'm going to try one more real quick. I'm going to move it up here. Actually, two more. I'm going to do another one. We have to do this. Then another type of fraction where we're going to have to use all of these. So, what if I had 3 and 6/25 times 3 and 4/20? I look at my whole numbers, they're the same. Convert my fractions into decimals. None of these have neither of these have the denominators that are ones I like, do they? Or even over here. How do I make this fraction into one I like that I can write a decimal with? Why am I going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 4?
Because 25 times 4 equals 100.
Yes, if I multiply 25 times 4, I get to 100. If I have 100 in my denominator, I can use my place value. So, 3 and 6 times 4 is 24. 25 times 4 is 100. What about this one? How do I get it to a number I really like? A fraction I like? Rachel.
Times 4 times 5 and 20 times 5.
Why am I going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 5?
Because we need 20 times 5, that equals 100.
It gives me 100 in my denominator. Exactly. What's 4 times 5, Rachel?
20.
20. What's 20 times 5? Who can tell me what 20 times 5 is?
100.
100. So then from there, I can make these into decimals, can't I? I can. 3.24, because that's 24 hundredths. It ends in my hundredths place. And 3.20. Okay? Can I figure out what it should be? Which one's greater? I sure can. 3 and 24 hundredths is greater than 3 and 20 hundredths, which is also just 3 and 2/10. Okay? Bam, bam. Remember, if we have fractions that aren't nice, figure out what we have to do to get those to 100 or to get them to 10. Okay? We could have easily divided this by 2 and gotten 2/10, and that would have given us the same answer. Okay? Now, last thing I'm going to show you before we're done with this, because this is a long one. 3 thousandths and 8 hundredths. How do I write 3 thousandths? Who thinks they can tell me? If I look up here, how can I write 3 thousandths? Bailey. 0.003. 0 in my, I don't have any tenths, any hundredths, but I have 3 in my thousandths place. And then 8 hundredths is just 0.08. Can we figure out which one's greater than? Which one's greater? If I was going to put my little circle in here to figure out which one was a larger fraction, is 3 thousandths greater than or less than 8 hundredths? Natalie. Is larger, yeah. So 3 thousandths is less than 8 hundredths. Because look, a 0 and nothing, they're both the same in my tenths place, but this one has something in my hundredths place.